So the truth is, if someone doesn't bring their part, we should feel it. And if we don't, we've set up a system where people don't matter. Encouragement isn't optional. It's fuel. If all you do is correct, you'll take the courage out of your team. Encouragement fuels consistency. If volunteers don't connect to the why, the what will feel like work. People are not projects, and people are not stepping stones or launch pads to acquiring your calling. You're not filling roles, you're shaping lives. You're building leaders. Are we using people to build the church, or are we using the church to build people? To me, that is a mandate and a responsibility, is to use the church to build people. My final thought to you is serving should build people, not burn them out. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations. Today, we're going to be talking about how to set your volunteers up to win. I believe this is imperative as an organization, as a church, to really think about, how do I set my servant leaders, my volunteers up for success? Really, the win is not just when services run smoothly. The real win is when your volunteers walk away pumped, knowing they made a difference, growing in their lives, and feeling valued. Too often, churches focus on execution and forget that volunteers aren't employees. They're people sacrificing their time to serve. If we don't build a culture that empowers, encourages, and cares for them, we will absolutely burn them out. And I know churn and retention is a huge gap in current churches in 2025. So for me, I'm going to be breaking down how to set your volunteers up for success, not just for Sundays, but actually for the long run. Number one, volunteers need to know they matter. Do your volunteers actually know they make a difference? And yes, in the grand scheme of things, right? You have team nights, you have moments, you have text messages, and I'm not insinuating all those things are bad. I think those are obviously incredible. But when you go from the person who serves once a month to your executive pastor and ask them, hey, do you know why and what you do specifically correlates to the outcomes that all of us are for, which is life change, which is salvations, which is freedom, which is purpose. So my question to you is, do your volunteers actually know they make a difference? Do they know they make a difference practically? Do they know that their part is actually a massive part, not just in your church, but in the kingdom of God? And are they moving forward in life? That's a huge indicator, by the way, that you're actually leading somebody, is they're not just doing things and executing, but their life is flourishing. That the job they work at, their marriage, their family, their relationships are actually moving forward. Because to me, if you think about leadership, that's what leadership is. Leadership is leading someone somewhere. You're either growing or you're dying. So when you think about this and moving forward and pushing people forward, it all goes back to that motivation of, do they know they're making a difference? And this is also a huge, huge observation about knowing if they're making a difference and they matter, is that there's actual winning. Like when you think about winning is obvious. When the Super Bowl ends, you know who won and you know who lost. And it should be just as clear in our churches. When our teams win, they should feel it. And I don't know about you, man, but there are moments in my life, in my leadership journey, where it doesn't feel like we're winning. And then there are times when we do feel like we're winning, but it doesn't necessarily get celebrated or seen, and that's okay. But the big thing here is we should know when we're winning. Winning should be obvious. When there's a person on my team and their marriage is thriving, when there's health to it, there's a vibrancy to it, to me, that should be obvious. So the truth is, if someone doesn't bring their part, we should feel it. And if we don't, we've set up a system where people don't matter. And that's very direct and confrontational. But if you think about Ephesians 5 in the body, every person needs to bring their part and be who God designed them to be. And we should feel that. We should feel the gap when you're not here. We should feel the gap when you're not serving anymore. But we should feel the gap when you are. We should feel the gap. We should feel the momentum that happens when somebody is behind the mission that you have. So my question to you is, do your volunteers know they are vital? That this thing would not happen without them? Or are they just filling a spot and role to get the outcomes that you want? Number 2, volunteers need feedback and encouragement. Everything about leadership is about these 2 principles: affirmation, correction. You can't have one without the other. You have to have both. People want to know how they're doing, not just when they mess up, but not just when they're winning, not when they're uber successful. Because if you actually want high capacity, high quality leaders, you're going to have to be okay with them desiring growth, desiring feedback, desiring pushback. That's healthy because people want to know how they're doing. And to be honest, a lot of times people don't know how they're doing. There's not a level of self-assessment or self-internal motivation to understand, man, I think I'm doing all right. I think I'm doing bad. It's more just, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do as a Christian. Well, there's layers to that, obviously, and there's nuance to that. But in my opinion, what I'm submitting to you is people really do have a desire. They absolutely have a desire to hear what they're doing well. But just as much as that, they have a desire to know what they're not doing well. And the second you can understand that correction is healthy, correction is a part of being a leader, a part of being a pastor, you will get to a point where you understand they're both healthy. But also, by the way, encouragement can be unhealthy, not just correction. Encouragement can be flattery. And flattery means if I just gas you up and say nice things about you, maybe you'll stay longer. That's still not a healthy motivation. So a lack of feedback discourages engagement. If they never hear from you, they assume they aren't doing well. I don't know about you, but oftentimes when the coach stops talking to the players, they don't often think, man, I bet he thinks I'm doing great. It's usually the opposite. They're saying, I bet he does not like me anymore. I bet I did something. And there's always space and room for people to assume things. And you never want to be a person who makes assumptions. But for us to be aware that it is really important for us to consistently be in their life, encouraging them, giving them feedback, being a person who can, again, not just give them feedback or encouragement to get them more engaged, but because we just love them and we're for them and we believe in them. So encouragement isn't optional, it's fuel. If you want fuel for your team, be a person who is insanely specific about what they're doing well. Don't overgeneralize or be general with feedback and encouragement. Be specific with both, because the more general you get, that's where there's more room for people to just make assumptions. Just be specific. When you did this, it made me feel proud. Man, when you said this on the platform, I was encouraged. Be specific. And if the only time you talk to your volunteers is to fix problems, they'll eventually stop stepping up. You should not just have meetings with people and that's the only time you talk to them. You are building disciples, you're building leaders. Part of that is proximity. You have to bring people in your life in along the journey to absolutely understand that encouragement isn't optional. It's fuel. If all you do is correct, you'll take the courage out of your team. Encouragement fuels consistency. Think about the word encouragement. It's putting in courage in people. You're putting courage in them because you're being positive and you're looking for the things that they're doing well. Positive reinforcement is always the best way to build leaders. It's always the best way to train dogs, to build kids, your children, and leaders. Positive reinforcement. Here's just an action step that I'm going to submit to you. You need to say thank you more. Simple gratitudes go way farther than you think. You should be so incredible grateful that God brought you people, that He has called you to lead, And that means they're sacrificing, they're taking time out of their life. They can say no. But for you, it's imperative to say thank you. Communicate clearly and early. Volunteers' biggest frustration is usually a lack of information. How far ahead are you communicating expectations? Information sets people up for success. Confusion sets them up for failure. So this is a big one for me. This is obviously a part of my position in our local church. It's just consistently communicating expectations and getting things ahead of people so that people can't be frustrated. Because people really do get frustrated when you don't give them enough information. Because again, when they have to assume things about call times or how long they have to be there or what the information is about the dates or the calendars, things that are on the calendar that they don't understand. And yes, you don't have to explain yourself all the time, but it really is important to learn how to articulate vision with clarity. You got to have both. You can't just overgeneralize vision. If you do that, what you're going to have happening is burnout and churn. And that is the recipe for disaster, is a high churn rate. Because again, confusion sets them up for failure. You want successful leaders in your church, in your organization, continue to articulate vision and information way ahead of time, as far ahead as you can get. I'm trying my best to be a person who articulates vision about specific things that our church is doing 12 months out. And we can reverse engineer it. And there's going to be things that come up. And there's going to be a level of flexibility and resilience that we have to have when things just come up. That's the real world. And I can do my part because this is a simple truth. If you want to do a large scale event, let's just hypothetically say you're going to do a youth conference. It does not matter if that conference is in 2 years or 2 weeks. The same amount of input, so workload, is going to be required, no matter if it's in 2 years or 2 weeks, if nothing's planned. So what you're doing is you're cramming 2 years worth of work in 2 weeks. You can see a world where when somebody has a full-time job, they have a marriage, they have family, they have friends, they have hobbies, that would be a recipe for churn and failure. You cannot expect excellence from volunteers when you don't give them the information they need to succeed. Do not be a person who teaches on excellence, but then doesn't give people proper time to ideate and to dream. The best planning, the best execution, the best leaders in your church will be the leaders that have margin to dream. So my question to you is, do our volunteers have everything they need before they walk into a service or an event? And make a clear delineation. What is a service and what is an event? And continue to have roadmaps and long-term planning for things, because you will burn people out. They might not just be burnt out physically, they're going to be burnt out mentally. They're not going to be bought into you anymore. And you're going to ask yourself, man, I thought that person had it in them. They were going to sacrifice on their building with me. And all of a sudden, they just stopped. And it's like, yeah, because you dumped things on them. You didn't delegate to them. And there is a big difference between those two things. Number 4, meetings. Keep it tight and purposeful. Volunteers are giving up their time. You and I need to honor that. My question to you, and you should ask yourself this about everything on your calendar: do you really need that meeting? Every meeting needs a plan, needs an agenda, and you need to send that agenda out 24 hours before. If you do not have a plan, don't even have the meeting. Because there's a difference between brainstorming meetings, there's a difference between execution meetings or retros and going back and reviewing things. All those things are imperative. I would just simply submit to you, you need to define that. Define what the meeting is. In our context, we have 3 meetings. That's it, as of right now. We have a Monday meeting that reviews the Sunday service from load in to load out. Tuesday, we have the internal staff meeting. That is simply staff. There's no servant leaders, no directors invited to that. That is all about department updates and pastoral things. And Thursday is always the 90-day outlook. So on that Thursday meeting, people are showing up with things that they've done over the last 7 days that they've executed on. So it's updates on events, not services. Every meeting needs a plan, and you need to send that agenda out 24 hours before. Here's a simple idea. Just have the same agenda for every meeting so you don't have to send it out. That's what I do. You got 3 meetings. Every single one has the same agenda. We do the same thing every single week. And it's not about being mundane. It's just about being healthy and consistent. Meetings without a plan are just wasted time. And wasted time burns out your best people. Because usually the best people are in the meetings. The best people are your directors. The best people are on the Zoom call, on the phone call, at the coffee table. And if you don't have a plan, you're wasting their time. And they don't have as much time as you think. Now, here's just, in my opinion, how you can structure your meetings effectively. You should really have skeleton, flesh, and then breath of life. So skeleton is set the heart and the direction. This is just bare bones. Make it as simple as possible. Set the heart and the direction. The flesh is, how do we apply this locally? How do we apply this to our team? How do we apply this to my department or my area of ministry within the local church? And then breath of life, final touches and making it real. You're bringing it to life. It's a simple way to think about it. And for us, the way we do it again is a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. We have one-on-ones, obviously, with our key directors in our church. But other than that, we just have a skeleton, a flesh, and a breath of life. Number 5, reverse engineer your year and communication plan. I kind of hinted at this before. You got to plan your year backwards. Start with the big vision and break it down into actionable steps. So what's the big picture? What is the big thing that you are striving for as an organization? And how do you reverse engineer that? So right now, we're ideating and dreaming about the theme and the budgets and the venues for Easter 2026, because that's a big deal. We want to have a great marketing plan. We want to have the best creative. We want to have the best logistics plans. So we plan our year ahead, 12 months, and then we reverse engineer it and plug in the little things. The best way to think about this is rocks, pebbles, sand, water. So rocks are the primary things that when you would put it into a glass container, these are the big things that absolutely have to be a part of it. Pebbles are the things that you love, that you care about. It might be specific to your church. Sand is any of the little things, team nights, meetings, and then water is personal preferences. And it should be in that order. A lot of organizations, a lot of churches that I meet with do water first. It's everybody's preference, everybody's vision, everybody's ideas. We do that first. Maybe we have time to do a team night once in a while. Then hopefully we have time to maybe do an event or have a guest preacher. And then at the big thing, oh yeah, I forgot we have an Easter service coming up. I guess I got to figure it out. You don't want to be that type of leader. You want to think about the big things and then reverse engineer it. And here's just a clear line, by the way. Over communication overwhelms. Under communication creates confusion. And that's just learning about your people. What do your people need in this current season? That is the best question you can ask yourself every single day. What do the people I lead need me for today? And how can I be the solution for the things that are in our context today? So you don't want to over communicate. That overwhelms people. I have a max of 2 Slack messages a day in a channel because I don't want to be overwhelming. But you don't want to under communicate. That creates confusion. And again, it's a balance in you learning your people. Nobody knows your people more than you do. I'm not going to give you a recipe of a 3-step process to better communicate. But don't over communicate and don't under communicate. Make a communication plan that keeps people informed but not overloaded. So just as much, to me, as your 12-month calendar, have a communication calendar. For all of our team leaders, they send 3 messages a week. They send a head message, a hand message, and a heart message. What does that mean? The heart is why, the hand is how, and the head is what. And what do I need to be thinking about? What do I need to be dreaming about? How? This is how we're going to do it. This is the action plan. This is who's going to serve this Sunday and why. This points to decisions for Christ. This points to a testimony just to continue to put inspiration in people. So have a communication plan that keeps people informed but not overwhelmed. Number 6, one-on-one leaderships stop burnout. If you want to stop burnout of the best leaders, have a really, really, really good one-on-one. Because you and I know this. Burnout doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time. It's a subtle fire that's dimming down. There's a subtleness to it. It's a weekly thing that you see over 52 weeks. Somebody who you thought was excellent, all of a sudden stops showing up on time. All of a sudden, it's the little things that continue to produce burnout. And the best place for you and I to catch that is a one-on-one. Don't just talk about church and one-on-ones. Ask about their life. Don't just talk about church. It's not about church. I ask these questions on my one-on-ones. What is your relationship with God? So how's your relationship with God? What is your biggest problems relationally right now? What's your relationship with money right now? And what is your next step in this church? Those are simple questions. I want to know how their relationships are, how their finances are. Man, how's their relationship with God? Like, tell me about what God's speaking to you. And to be honest, that fires me up too, because they're telling me about the prayer time or their journal time or a thought that they felt like God shared to them. And I'm like, man, that fires me up. And money. Everybody has financial things. Everyone struggles with something. It's usually relationships or money. And so that just gives them freedom to share in a space and place. So if all you care about is what they do, you actually don't care about them. That's the reality of it. That's just the brutal, honest truth, is if all you do is care about what they do for your church, you don't care for them. You don't have a pastoral heart. Pastoral heart is caring about them. It's caring about their finances. It's caring about their budgets, caring about, are they tithing? It's caring about, and all of that, by the way, that's all fruit. There's always a root to it. And you asking great questions helps them self-discover their current context. Because again, self-revelation is the best revelation because they don't have to be dependent on you to give them constant feedback. They're like, man, I am not doing good relationally right now. I need to spend more time with my friends. I feel depleted. And every single person is going to be different. But again, don't just talk about church. Don't just talk about execution. Ask their life. And the three areas for a one-on-one focus: personal growth, spiritual growth, relational growth. So I gave you my 4 questions, but here's even more general ones. How's life? What's next for you? Where are you at with God? How's your home life? How's your friendships? How's your mental health? Just give them open-ended questions to let them fill in the bigger thing. The worst thing you can do, and as a communicator and as a friend or as a pastor, is to just give specific examples. And like a preaching example is, maybe you're struggling with this. What you just did is you just listed 4 things that potentially some people are struggling with, or you could just say, maybe you are just struggling. What you just did is you made it so general that the Holy Spirit can actually do his job, which is convict. It is to point to the thing that's within them. Just as much as in a one-on-one, I don't want to be constantly specific. I want to be more open in general, so it gives them freedom to give their answer, and it's a response. So you can just listen and continue to push forward. Number 7, make the why bigger than the what. Every training you do, every conversation you do, every Slack message you do, every single team rally you do should reinforce the why. Why is everything. You should start with why. You should continue to reinforce that why, because if volunteers don't connect to the why, the what will feel like work. If they don't connect to the why, the what will feel like work. And it shouldn't. We make hard work look fun because it's not their job. It's their calling. And despite the amount of time they spend serving is not a direct indication of their calling. It's a calling. If you're a Christian, you should serve. That's just plain as black and white. You should serve in your local church, because we're not just filling roles in our churches. That is a toxic way to think about human beings. People are not projects, and people are not stepping stones or launch pads to acquiring your calling. You're not filling roles, you're shaping lives. You're building leaders. If all people know is what they do, they'll quit when it gets hard. If they know why, they'll push through. It's going to get hard. Church is hard. Setting up and tearing down. There's people, there's relationships, there's challenges, there's arguments, there's disagreements. It is hard. And it is beautiful when we understand our why. Why do I show up at 6:30 a.m. on a Sunday? Because I love God and He changed my life. And I want people to experience that too. So we can all get aligned with that. We can get all aligned with our vision, because vision isn't necessarily as important as the thing that they actually believe. You could say your mission statement 1,000 times, doesn't mean people actually have it in their heart. People are going to care about you. They're going to connect with your church. And then there's going to be a level of conviction. If you can help people get to the point of conviction, promise you're going to have an excellent team. Number 9, care for your volunteers. Don't just coordinate them. We don't need a volunteer coordinator. We need a team that actually cares for volunteers. And I have tons of thoughts about titles and specific position in churches. You should never have a hospitality leader in your church. You should have a spirit of hospitality in every single one of your teams. And I'm just submitting to you, you shouldn't have a volunteer coordinator. You shouldn't have a volunteer director who takes care of all the volunteers, of all the responsibilities of the volunteers. You don't need a volunteer coordinator. You need a team that actually cares for volunteers. You don't need one person. You need a culture of care. You need a culture of loving pastoral care. Because their number one responsibility should be knowing their team's next step. So every single person on your team who is a leader, a team leader, in our context, we say service leader, team leader, director, pastor. If you have a position description in our church, your number one responsibility is to know your team's next step. Whether that be practically, whether that be somebody else is rising up and you're replacing yourself, there should always be a sense of, I know my team's next step. And I've said this every single podcast, but church is a place to build people's lives, not just get a job done. You know you got the wrong leader when they're there for a paycheck. Because this thing is not about being paid. It is about continuing the kingdom of God. If a person is more important than a task, prove it by how you lead them. And I'm going to say this. Are we using people to build the church, or are we using the church to build people? To me, that is a mandate and a responsibility, is to use the church to build people. I want to build the best leaders on the planet because, again, the church is not a place where we just have to use people to build our platforms. It's the opposite. Last thought here, and then we're going to close. Celebrate the hidden heroes, not just the ones on the stage and not just the visible roles. Celebrate the hidden heroes. Celebrate the administration team more often. Celebrate the people who are setting up and tearing down. Anytime I get on the platform, I always try to celebrate the hidden heroes, and I'm submitting to you, you should do the same, because the best volunteers often serve in places nobody sees. It's not cute. It's not cute to clean bathrooms. It's not cute to change diapers. But what it is it's important because you're honoring God through worship. So celebrate effort and not just execution. I want to celebrate the input, not just the outcomes. I want to celebrate consistency and character more than I do performance. Because the reality is if the only people we celebrate are the ones on the platform, we're failing. Because it's not about building platforms. It's about being a platform. So here's my closing challenge to you. Volunteers are not just a workforce. They're the heart of the church. They're the body. They're literally Christ's bride. That's a mandate, and that's important for us to be aware that this is not a job. This is a calling. This is not a career. It's a calling. The goal isn't just a smooth service. It's a healthy, thriving, engaged people. If you can focus on health, you can focus on having a thriving culture and an engaged culture. Engagement's more important than numbers. I'd rather have 20 engaged leaders than 200 non-engaged leaders. Just like I'd rather have you and I'd rather have 5,000 followers who are engaged with us rather than 5 million and nobody engages with you. If we do this right, our teams should be growing, not just grinding. Your team should be growing. There should be a level of growth to this. Growing in unity, growing in favor, growing in numbers, not just grinding, not just getting through it. I don't want to get through something, I want to grow through something. My final thought to you is serving should build people, not burn them out. And if we care for our volunteers well, the church wins in the long run. So ask yourself this: do my volunteers know they matter? Am I communicating well or creating confusion? Are we leading volunteers with care, or are we just managing them? And again, if you just continue to challenge yourself to love people well, to care for them, not just correct them, to love them, listen to them, and help their dreams come true, I promise you're going to continue to have a thriving volunteer culture that nothing could stop. Nothing in the world could stop a healthy, thriving church. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If this encouraged you, please share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Let's build teams that last. See you next week on Conversations.